Good afternoon. My name is Christine Tutssel, and I'm the co-founder of Axonify. And with me this afternoon, I have Janis Leigh, and Janis is the CHRO at Giant Eagle. And Janis has spent most of her career in a CHRO capacity in the fashion business. And about 3 years ago, she moved over into the grocery industry. So Janis, I'd like you to, if you want to add anything to that, and then introduce us to Giant Eagle and what that business is all about.
Actually, it's interesting because I've spent my career absolutely in fashion retail department stores, and hence absolutely love fashion, but I love food equally as much. So it was a really easy transition moving over into grocery, and especially with Giant Eagle. And I'm not sure who in the room is familiar with Giant Eagle. Hands up. So you all must. There we go.
People from Pittsburgh here?
I was going to say, so you must have a connection to Pittsburgh or potentially Ohio, but absolutely. So you can hardly drive anywhere in Pittsburgh without driving past a Giant Eagle or a Get-Go. So we're about 11 billion in sales, and that is a blend of course, supermarkets. We have pharmacy. A really strong pharmacy business, and in addition to fuel and convenience stores. And so that's really sort of our business unit mix. 36,000 team members. Of the 36,000, 34,000 of them are hourly team members that work in our stores, our distribution centers, and our fuel stations. And they are really what our focus is and the work that we do. So we're super proud of our team members. We are a family-owned business. The 5 original families that started Giant Eagle continue to own Giant Eagle today and sit on the board. And actually, that's kind of how we got to the Axonify journey. On joining Giant Eagle, we were challenged by our board to find a great, engaging way to bring learning and communication to our team members. And we looked to the Axonify platform.
So what drove that? If the board was saying, hey, we need better learning and engagement, what was going on in the business that led to that?
We were going through transformation and really had been bringing in some big pieces from a technology perspective. But I would also say, too, the one thing in joining Giant Eagle that really meant a lot was this is a family business that really cares about its team members. And so it wasn't just about checking the box. It was about how can we really bring that learning and talk to our team members in a better way.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting one of the family members who attended our Axonicom conference back in Nashville. And you could see how passionate he was about the business and about the associate in particular, like really wanting to make sure that did the right thing to help and support that role in the business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, we're here to talk about change management, and this was a massive shift for the organization to take on, an overall transformation, but support it with a digital platform. And so what kind of complexities were you dealing with in trying to, get through the process?
Absolutely. So, well, like all organizations, when you join, you spend your first little while discovering and touring stores and meeting people. And really early on, what we realized is while, we had some great work from a technology perspective in our human capital management, there was a lot of things that were in the store that I think there was an opportunity. So we realized early on that when we were touring through stores, the process of learning was still having to get off the floor for 30 minutes into the training room, looking up courses. When we were doing orientation, for any of you who have worked in retail, whether it's part-time jobs or you're in retail right now, it was still that formula of 3 days of orientation where you're locked in the training room and you're watching videos and you're signing off paperwork. And then we sit you in front of a computer and we put you through a day's worth, if not more, of computer-based training. And so it was really, how do we make that better? Because what we could see in the numbers was we weren't retaining those team members. We were measuring team members as they joined us. And not only were they dropping off in the first 3 days, they were also dropping off in 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. And we could see what was happening to where we were at the point, for every 10 team members you were hiring, you were only retaining 3 or 4. And so that's where the challenge is, and that's where the expense was. So we really had to take a step back and think about how do we work through what a great orientation onboarding is for our hourly team members. How do we get them engaged and really excited about joining our company? That was the first challenge. The other piece is, as I was touring stores, you know, from a retail perspective, you got to remember these 34,000 team members, they don't have laptops, they don't have email addresses. So they rely on the good old bulletin board by the time clock. And every piece of retail space or real estate space, that's how we communicated for the most part, other than having the managers during meetings and huddles. So it was really an opportunity on how do we push out communication, not only to the general population, but also specifically to certain groups. So there was a communication challenge as well.
Okay, interesting. So how do they access the communications and the materials that you're sending out today?
So we, first thing we stepped back, and from a communication perspective, we looked at how do we build out our intranet, and of course our team members can access that. But you know, you come in for your shift maybe 3 or 4 times a week. I don't know if you're necessarily thinking about to sign on to the intranet. When we looked at the Axonify platform, that was the really exciting part, because we were having team members engage with us on their handheld devices. That was one of the options. And we really were able very quickly to start to push out messages that matter, not only from an enterprise perspective, but also at the local level. So store leaders in our pilot program responded super well to being able to send out those messages directly. They would run contests on, you know, trying to find different products in the store. They would have quizzes, and you could really see the excitement and engagement from the team members using the platform for communication.
So are they using their own devices or Zebra devices, or what are they using?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, they absolutely use both, but for the most part, and that was a concern that we had, is will they go to their personal devices? But we actually had a really high adoption.
And you're a unionized environment.
We are a unionized environment. Of our team members that are hourly, about 50 to 60% are unionized.
Okay, and any issues around that with the?
We worked very closely in partnering, because it was a great tool that people were willing to adopt. They could see the benefits.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Fantastic. So, you know, what would you do differently? Like, we had a chat about this earlier around, like, you need to engage other team members. This morning we had a session where we had the operators on the stage, and we were talking about how do you drive, you know, a digital transformation. And, you know, they were from the operational side. You're from the HR side, right? So what did you learn? Would you have done anything differently from the get-go? You know, no pun intended.
And I'm not sure how many in the room are HR and how many are operators, but from an operator's perspective, and especially in retail, it's not like you're rushing to really follow up and sign up for HR initiatives. We get it, like you have a day job. And so how do we partner? What we did is we looked at the tool, and initially, it was HR driven. That's what we wanted to do. We were excited about the micro-learning, the gamification, all those great things. But that wasn't enough. We really had to take a step back and think with our operators, you know, what's in it for you? Why are we doing this? And it really boils down to operational excellence. You're able to engage with the team members in a different way. It really allows us to do cross-training, because there's different learning journeys that you can take for the different team members. At the end of the day, it was getting the leaders to think that the value and impact was really using this as a business tool and not an HR initiative that was coming down the pike. And to do that, not only did we partner with the operators and meet with them and think about how we could do this rollout, we also thought we needed someone from a L&D perspective who had that credibility with the operators. So it just so happened we had an open role for leading learning and development at the time that we were working on the implementation. And rather go look for someone with more of an HR background, more of that technical expertise in L&D, we actually went to the operators to find someone where we could bring them along from an L&D technical perspective, but they spoke the language of our retail operators, and they could really bring us along in helping people understand why this is a great tool and why it's a business tool. So that was a really sort of a turning point for us in making sure that we could really speak the language of the business and help them in that way.
So how do you like scale that and sustain it then?
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're not talking about 1,000 people, we're talking about 36,000 people,
Right.
which is a significant size workforce
Yeah.
and a lot of different stores. And additionally, one of the complexities in grocery is you have, you know, all these different departments within the store, and you have a large store format. So it's not like, you know, you can go tap the guy out in the back and say, hey, like, did you do this? Right? Like,
No,
it
it's
doesn't
not.
work in that environment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's no such thing as a big bang implementation. And what we really had to do is kind of step back and think about, we have multiple different business units within the organization I had mentioned up front. So we looked at our different business units and thought, okay, where can we start? So we really kind of phased it in the different pieces and in different parts of the organization. So Get-Go is our C-stores, it's our convenience stores and our fuel stations. And they're much smaller boxes, right? So you've got a team of maybe 10 to 12, 14 people, and there's multiple locations. So we started with Get-Go in the sense where we really partnered with their leaders on starting to build out how you do orientation, how we could do some learning journeys and things as such. We got the leaders on board, and we really had them take the step forward as being the ones that introduced the tool to the organization. So we used the smaller organization of the bigger enterprise to really sort of learn how we could roll out, how we could build that enthusiasm. And of course, the big piece was we were able to really measure the learning as we were rolling it out. So the beauty of the platform is that you can measure through the gamification is the base learning and what people are achieving. And when you could show those numbers and that metric to the business, it really made a big difference in getting them on board. The other piece too is we started early on with Get-Go to see a real difference in their early retention numbers of those new team members. So we had a second metric really to hold on to. But I will say one of the key things with Get-Go is they built in for the store leaders quarterly bonus, they built in a strong participation rate for the unit. So you were bonused on how well your team participated in using the device and the platform. So those wins in that smaller business unit is what we ported over into the supermarket, which is our much larger piece of the organization. And we took the winnings, the learnings, we built out the credibility from an operator perspective, and then brought that over into supermarkets. So that was the piece around the learning journey and the orientation and the onboarding. But almost on a separate stream, we were building out the communication tool. And, you know, it's amazing because we think about the learning is critical, especially from an operational perspective, but communication is key as well. We did the same thing very much. We started with pilots. We had different parts of the organization. And we really engaged the leaders in those pilots to really make it about something that they were doing for their team members. And so that's how we built it through on a phased approach.
And then did you translate that into pharmacy? Was there anything?
We did. So in amongst our pharmacy was one of the other business units that we accomplished. I will say, you got to love pharmacy. They were right on it. They really embraced the tool and were, quite frankly, the leaders in the organization as far as really getting on board from an engagement perspective.
So you're talking about engagement, which drives longer term retention. So what do you see there now in terms of retention? You said you measure the first 12 months and then after 12 months.
Absolutely. So what we did is we saw a really nice uptick in retention where we were starting to retain much bigger numbers. There was a bit of an ebb and flow, but at the end of the day, we're sitting in some stores, we're sitting in the 80%. And this is for the first 12 months. It's higher when you go past, but we were sitting at 80% and retaining our team members. On average, we sit in the 60s, but we're really proud of that because I will tell you, we were sitting way down in the 30s and 40s when we first started the journey. And that's only within 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, that's significant. And it's also like, that drops right to the bottom line. I mean, that's a very expensive process having to turn.
Yeah, you really could see it. And, you know, you would be getting a lot of anecdotal stories as well as seeing it in the numbers. What was happening is people were really excited. Leaders were excited about the fact that they had these team members who were joining us, these hourly team members, who were literally on day one going right onto the floor and engaging with their teams. And it was really that hook to have them keep coming back. So it was a really exciting trend that we saw very early on.
Awesome. That's great. So we are going to go to the audience for questions shortly. Just a couple other things that I'd like to ask you, Janis. So how do you get all these people to do the same thing or the right thing at the right time? I mean, you're trying to drive a lot of different behaviors across a complex organization. How do you do that?
So I think the success of getting people on board really was about showing the value to the team leaders, showing the value to the leaders in the sense where how the impact came. Because we had measurement, we were able to prove it. But I have to say, you can do all those things, but if you don't have an engaging tool that's relevant, so we really focused on the material and the learning journeys that we were building out, that they were relevant to the business, that the content was there, and we started to really reshape it and make sure that it was that build, that they could see that operational excellence that I talked about earlier really come to play because their team members were engaged in the learning. They were able to move people around the store because they were cross-trained. And from a communication perspective, it really brought everything together. I will say we focused a lot on I just want to touch on communication at that level and how you get everybody sort of engaged and working together. At an enterprise level, we actually had our CEO drop a few recording messages out to the team members. And it was exciting because it's kind of like when you're on Instagram, you see all the thumbs up and the comments and things as such. And that was a real turning point for us. We started to have leaders come to us and say, well, I want to roll this out, but I want to put it on Thrive, which is Thrive is our Axonify. We branded it within the organization. And from an HR perspective, moving away from HR is telling you to do this to actually having the business come to us and say, I want to use this tool. That was really important.
That's great. That's great. So you talked about GetGo and when you did the implementation there and then tied it to the manager scorecard. Did you extend that across the Giant Eagle Supers?
We did. But we did a little bit different. Each business unit has its own way of working. So with supermarkets, it was more about being part of the weekly reporting metrics and the market part. And so the regionals took accountability for those participation scores and really made sure they amplified that message of why this was important and why they wanted their store leaders to really ensure that we're using this tool.
And they responded well to that?
And they responded well to that. Some of the other things that really helped was not only did you have these participation scores, but we were able to give these metric packages to the leaders, and they were going to their dashboards, and they could start to see who on their team were the experts in certain areas, whether it's produce or bakery or front end, whatever it may be. And they were then able to tap the shoulder of those team members to say, hey, can I get you to do some peer training? And so it really engaged team members who potentially were just quietly doing their job and really brought them in to really be partners in the store. There was also team members that we brought in as champions. So we didn't want to put it just on the store leader. And so that champion network that we built out really made a huge difference. And we could identify those champions based on their usage. So the metrics were key.
So when you started, though, did you identify champions in the stores outside of the leaders to drive the sustainment of the implementation?
We did. So we looked at every store has them, and every organization has them. You know who your top personality plus is what I like to call it. team members, and we definitely identified them. We had the leaders help us identify, and we rallied those champions together to really help in the implementation. But then things evolve, and you started to say users use the platform. And so things started to move where sometimes you would switch out your champions. But it was definitely a way to bring everyone in and the team members to be really involved.
That's great. So I know that you told me that when you started at Giant Eagle, you went to the store and you did the associate onboarding process.
Yeah.
And wasn't so great.
No, it wasn't. And it was getting back to that whole piece about, who wants to sit in front of a computer and just look at a computer, especially in retail. We're in retail because we love rolling up our sleeves. We're operators at heart. I grew up from the sales floor all the way through. And so sitting in a conference room and just continually going through things just wasn't engaging. And so if I didn't see it as engaging, I surely thought that from a team member perspective, and we heard from our store leaders that we really needed to think things differently. So that was really the turning point from that perspective.
So have you gone back into the store and redone the onboarding program now that you've changed it up?
I have not, but we worked really hard. And I will tell you that where we started on the initial shift from an orientation perspective, one of the key things about sustainability and your change management curve is we constantly go back to the business and say, okay, what's working, what's not working, because it's not just said and done. And so now we look at metrics and we listen to our store leaders and we start to evolve things and help them change it. And I would even say too, it depends on stores. We have stores that are market districts, so they are premium, large grocery stores. And then we have smaller stores. So you really have to be able to be agile and understand the nuances of each of the different stores, and really work with those leadership teams and give them choices on how they can roll things out.
So is that like a regular cadence that you have with them, or is it communicated, like you send the dashboards, they have access to those and they give input? How does that actually work to sustain that?
So our L&D lead for hourly, the unicorn we found in the stores that was wonderful, where he came from stores and came into L&D, he basically spends all his time talking to store leaders in and out of stores. And his job is really to keep listening, to keep evolving. And so it's a constant feedback loop. The other piece is we really celebrate the wins. And when we're celebrating the wins, leaders are seeing what others are doing, and it's really helping really build that wave and really create a sustainable tool that they see as their tool, not as HR's tool.
Right. Fantastic. So we just have a few minutes left, so we'll go to the audience. If you have any questions, if you want to raise your hand, there's a couple of runners around. There's a question here at the front, Amanda. Oh, Megan.
Hi, I'm Joe with IBM, and
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you. I know in the grocery segment, convenience as well, like that the localization and the community side of things is very important, right? Being able to serve your community during a time of crisis or some sort of disruption. I think it's really interesting what you've done with kind of the bring your own device strategy and communicating. Curious if you've tested, any kind of localized messaging or contextual messaging that might help support business continuity during some sort of a disruption or something in store operations that are local.
That's a great question. You're absolutely right. It is about localization. And we absolutely, we've created these communities within the communication tool. So it allows us to bring people together under certain groups. But there is the ability to push out as well, to push the communication out, which really gives us a lot of strength in getting to our team members really quickly on that messaging. And so I will say too, from a localization, community is critical for us, not only at an enterprise level, but we recognize that we're part of the community. So it really allows the store leader to put different messaging specifically to the store and really get people to rally behind things. And it's everything from absolutely, there's how we participate from a volunteerism and helping the community in that way. But I will even say on a product level, we have stores that have very local product. It's a local supplier, and they may be the only Giant Eagle that carries those candy apples in the fall. But we now have the ability to push that out to that specific store about how great those candy apples are and how they can sell them to our customers. And so that localization and that way to sort of make the path is very specific has really helped with the platform.
Yeah. Hello.
At the back, in the middle of
Hello.
the back. Oh.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi, I'm Francisco. I'm from Dominican Republic. It's a pleasure. I have a specific question about grocery. For example, I work for a grocery company, and one of the biggest challenges for us is that we have high staff turnover. So we have rotation of the staff that we have, for example, operators. And sometimes it's difficult to maintain a plan of change management when we have that specific situation. Also, for example, in the Dominican Republic, grocery is an industry that is still dealing with needs that have the industry, for example, work on weekends or have a specific or different shift. And those situations, most of the time, have like a bad attitude from our operators, or they do not want to participate in some programs that change management propose. So in your experience, which could be like the best way to go into the situation?
So I just want to make sure I understood. So basically, you're talking about from a change management perspective with retail, you have people who are the turnover. How do you keep them engaged when they're only there for on the weekend, or they're limited, right? And sometimes you get that they're not necessarily on board. So how do you win them over? So I will say that was that we also had that challenge of turnover and retention especially for new team members. The key was absolutely that we had consistent messaging coming through the tool. And the learning journeys that we had built out on the onboarding piece, they were very individualized, right? So everybody learns at a different pace. Sometimes they need to repeat a module, but there's a gamification piece in there. And it was really becoming about their personal journey. So there was something really early on when we were bringing team members into the platform and on their learning journeys, where they could see what was in it for them, which helped them keep coming back. The gamification piece is huge. I don't want to not talk about that because we were giving people, they had points and they were building up points, and quite frankly, they were building points so fast, we hadn't quite thought about how they were going to spend those points. So it was a little bit crazy from that perspective. But we are being in Pittsburgh and in Ohio. We're really involved with the sports community. So we were able to get quite a few tickets to some football games, hockey games, basketball games, you name it. And so we actually had team members be able to take those points and enter draws and win tickets. And I quite frankly, when I saw it, I thought, oh, are they really going to like get excited about this? Holy, they were super excited. So there was something in there where they were taking that points and turning them around and getting something for themselves. But on top of it, it was really about how they were coming back time after time from a learning perspective and really accomplishing. And they could see how they were jumping in their knowledge base. And we made sure from a recognition perspective, when the leaders had those reporting packs, they were able to call out and recognize and really celebrate with the team members the wins. And so those were some of the things that we did in order to really build that engagement in those team members. I hope that's helpful.
I think we can take one more question.
Hi, I'm with a retailer as well. I'm just curious, how did you guys support or change your structure at the home office level to support these initiatives within your store associates?
So you, from a perspective of how we had the different stakeholders support the implementation?
How did you change your home office structure to support all the change management you wanted to achieve at the store level?
Okay. So, honestly, we didn't really, it was more about not changing the structure of the home office, but it was really about bringing all the stakeholders to the table, right? So how did we bring internal comms together so that they could drive the communication piece? How did we bring the merchants and the operators as stakeholders so that they could see the benefits of the tool from a product knowledge and a learning perspective? So it was more about bringing everybody to the table rather than changing the structure. From a change management perspective, we don't have a change management office. Change management, we really build into the DNA of what we do from an HR perspective, but also throughout the organization. And so we very early on, the whole sort of the basics of that change management curve is something that we put out there, and as we brought our stakeholders together, so they understood just exactly what we needed to achieve from a change perspective.
So we're at time. Janis will be around for a few minutes afterwards if anybody has any additional questions. But I'd really like to thank you, Janis, for taking the time to share your experiences with us. And thank you for that.